I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. First, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go over before we get started. The first is that we will be recording this webinar, and it will be available tomorrow on the Live Well Colorado website. You can access that webinar by visiting the Toolbox and selecting Webinars in the Toolbox menu. Second, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the session. To ask a question, simply type it into the Questions tab on your on-screen control panel, and we will get to those at the end of the session. Now that that's been covered, I would like to turn it over to our first presenter, Lisa Walberg.
Thank you very much, Alex. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today for a discussion on the community food assessment. We have three of us will be talking. I'm not doing much. I really want to introduce the experts and the people who've done the work behind the scenes on this. Wendy Peters-Muschetti from WPM Consulting and Lynn Kathleen from Spark Policy Institute. So to give some quick and simple background, this webinar has been a very, very long time in the making. As some of you may be aware, in 2010, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment received federal ARA funding to create really a multi-strategy grant to create tools to work with communities and schools on healthy food access. And we previously presented a school food procurement report, farm-to-school primer, and a HEAL library. And now we have our community food assessment tools. And this work was done under contract by CDPHE with Live Well Colorado, with really the content expertise coming from WPM Consulting and Spark Policy Institute. The work that has gone into this is really unbelievable in terms of both its breadth and its depth. And so we are thrilled to be able to finally roll out this fabulous set of new tools. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy, who will talk through the agenda briefly and get us started.
Great. Hi, everybody. So Lisa already provided our first agenda item, a welcome and background. For the rest of the call, I will talk a little bit about wide food assessments and what are they in a very high-level overview of community food assessments and the tools that you can find on this part of the toolbox. I will talk a little bit about one particular section, which is the Getting Started section. And then I'm going to pass it off to Lynn, who's going to go more in depth about how someone could possibly use this tool when you come at it with a very specific question, and how you might actually, she'll walk through a scenario of how you could use some of the data sets and resources out there to kind of play out and actually address some of your assessment questions. Then it'll come back to me, and I just want to flag some really lovely resources that we have on the general resources page and the case studies page, and then we will close. We'll provide our contact information. We have some information about next webinars, and we should have plenty of time for Q&A. So I'm going to slowly, bear with me here, go to the website. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go live to this part of the Food Systems Toolbox. Some of you may have been on the webinar 2 weeks ago so if you were not, there was a webinar 2 weeks ago that oriented users to the entire Live Well Colorado Food Systems Toolbox. As Alex said, all webinars are available on Live Well Colorado's website. So if you'd like to go back and view that, you can watch the webinar that walks people through this whole toolbox from 2 weeks ago. But where I'm at right now, I'd actually like you to ignore the URL you see at the top of your screen. The easiest way to get here is actually very simple. It's livewellcolorado.org/food systems, all one word, food systems. And that was on our first slide, and we'll show you again at the end on the PowerPoint. So I'm going to skip most of this toolbox and go straight down to the community food assessment section. So here we are. This is the community food assessment section landing page. Just to flag for you, generally what you have here is we have an overview and an introduction of community food assessments, what they are, the purposes they serve, and then the 4 sections that we will actually be walking you through today are the 4 you see now. So getting started, data collection, case studies, and resources. So, and please bear with me, I hope you don't get seasick as I scroll back and forth through the site. So just starting, so briefly, just to kind of kick it off about community food assessments and what are they and why are we talking about them today. Community food assessments are pretty self-explanatory. I think it's a very good name. It's, when communities come together to research what's going on in their food system, but they're, as all assessments should be, the community food assessments most lend themselves to understanding the community food systems, but then also communicating those findings and using that information collected to inform very local policy change to strengthen local food systems. So again, what exactly does that mean? Most of you on the webinar have probably maybe already been involved with a food assessment or interested in doing one, are probably well aware that they're increasing in popularity. I could probably think of about maybe 10 even completed food assessments of one kind or another across the state already. And they can look really a lot of different ways. As you all know, the food system is very broad. It's a very diverse being, and there's a lot of different aspects that a community can look at in their food system. Generally, what we've seen a lot of so far in Colorado is food system assessments that look pretty focused on the issue of sort of access to healthy food, so understanding local issues of food security, food insecurity, what challenges and opportunities there are around accessing to and consuming fresh and healthy foods. We also see some food assessments that focus a little bit more heavily on sort of the economic development side, that sort of look at, wow, how do we actually grow local and regional food production and processing and distribution as part of a local economic development strategy. Thus far, they've tended to kind of look maybe at one or the other, but all of them do try to take a glance at the entire food system. There also have been some other food assessments that look sort of at land inventories, land availability, sort of if we want to grow our food system, sort of what of our inputs are even available to us. What I like, so on this page in front of you, the bullet points you see, I think capture really well sort of why would you do a food assessment. So the purposes of a food assessment are obviously research to better understand your local or regional food system. They are needs assessments. Oftentimes food assessments can try to understand more in depth what are needs around food access and food security in a community. I like the more positive framing of it, that they can be opportunity assessments. So food assessments can, as we say, anticipate possibilities. Like there may be an opportunity in your community that was unknown to you before to create, a food hub or more centralized food processing or distribution facilities that, previously hadn't been thought of. All good food assessments, I think, track population level data. As Lynn will show you in depth, there are a lot of data sets out there available to all communities that are collected at state and primarily national level, that are collected at regular intervals over time. So you can set up sort of a baseline through an assessment and understand how changes occur in years to come. Food assessments at times, I haven't seen this done very often, honestly, but can be used to evaluate existing programs or policies. If you have an urban agriculture policy, if you have really strong community food assistance programs in your municipality or county, they can be used to evaluate their effectiveness. I haven't seen that done so often, but they could be. And the last two I think are actually very important, maybe less tangible sort of outcomes, but purposes are assessments can be used to build and expand coalitions, bring more diverse players to the table, people that had never talked to each other but play a role in the food system together. And obviously the advocacy and awareness building is that in an ideal world, all outcomes of a food assessment are then used as talking points and engagement points for local elected officials and policymakers to increase awareness of what food insecurity exists in my community. What does that look like? Or to increase awareness of what are maybe some missed economic development opportunities related to the food system. So food assessments and what they are. The first section specific section I'm going to dive into is the getting started section. So bear with me here. So getting started. This is packed full, we think, of really wonderful tools and guidance documents. I will not walk through all of these here. I think you all know how to maneuver websites. You can come back when you can and click through all of these and see what's here. But basically this section is here to kind of help folks think about, obviously you have not started perhaps your food system assessment, but you're considering it. And there's a series of tools here to really help you think about, well, one, do you even really need a food assessment? I'm a fan. I've worked with several communities across the state now conducting community food assessments. I really value the process, obviously, but I do not believe it's always necessary to do a food assessment. Sometimes you really know what the problem is and you really know what some strategies are, and it's just a good idea to get going on it. You don't need to spend time doing assessment. But there are tools in here that would help you and your coalition come to that kind of answer, is if you are ready or not. So tools that you'll see here, obviously we have an assess your readiness section, and this actually, you can actually click out to a tool, a checklist that you can walk through to say, okay, so maybe you actually do believe strongly that you need a food assessment, and this is the kind of tool that will help you think about what are maybe all the important pieces that helps to have in place before you actually start. Other sections in here, define and build your coalition. Basically what this is saying is that from what we have seen, food assessments that start with a coalition in place and build upon and enhance that coalition are really the ones that end up getting used. When you have people at the table from the very beginning that are invested in the process, that are able, willing, able, ready to act on the findings and the results, then it's a successful process and you're actually going to have implementable actions coming out of it. So the coalition piece, obviously very critical. We have some great tools around actually developing a work plan once you know, yes, by golly, we do want to do one, we think we're ready. There's still a lot of sort of honing in and focusing that needs to happen. So the develop a work plan and the define the boundaries are really good sets of tools and worksheets to help you do just that, is to begin to focus a little bit. And one thing that we talk about throughout these sections, and Lynn is going to demonstrate a bit, is we keep sort of coming back to the importance of really defining your question from the very beginning, is that so oftentimes communities really know they want to do a food assessment, they have a great coalition, but perhaps everyone at the table cannot yet articulate what is the one question that we really want to answer with this, because we can't answer everything. So there's some good worksheets in here that may help you and your coalition kind of come to that place, to have a very leading question that everyone can agree upon and focus on. So documenting what you already know. Again, I think what Lynn is going to show you, and we'll show you at the resources page at the end, there's many, many resources out there, existing data sets, local, state, national data sets, that can pull a lot of information for you together before you even go out in the assessment piece. Is just kind of get a profile of your community already, and we'll, again, flag some of those for you. And here are some examples right here of where you can go to document what you already know. So lastly, I'm just going to touch upon these last bullet points at the bottom of the page here. I've touched upon this a little bit already, but just from observations in Colorado and around the country, common characteristics of a successful food assessment. Hopefully this is fairly obvious, but this whole section of the toolbox is community food assessments. There are many, many other types of research and assessments that you can do, market analysis for new grocery retail. You can do very academic, rigorous academic research at a state or national level about what your food system looks like. The tools here are really focused on arming communities to better understand their community and how it's functioning and how they're relating to food. So because of that, obviously, we'd like to stress that successful assessments obviously employ community-based research methods, that you're not only coming out of a diverse coalition, but you're employing sort of meaningful, creative ways to work with residents across your community, across your county, whatever you define, and helping to even come up with what are the questions that you're wanting to address with this. What is important in your community to look at deeper? Related to that, obviously assessments really provide context. Yes, it's important to use existing secondary data sets that are collected, at the national level, but community food assessment actually provides very local, context. What is the culture of your community? How does it affect how people make decisions around food? The third one, obviously, we hope that they ask questions that are answerable, and that's coming back to that importance of at the very beginning, like identifying a question to lead the entire assessment process, and that everyone at the table can articulate what is that question exactly that we're trying to answer. I've talked about this, but working from within an existing coalition, hopefully not everyone in the coalition would ever agree on everything, but having some shared goals and values is obviously critical to kick it off. Again, this is sort of just research and assessment 101, not unique to a food systems assessment, but some lessons learned that we thought we'd just share here. The second to last one, sort of relying on clean data, is that we have seen that having partners, oftentimes maybe an academic partner from university, that can help develop very valid and reliable survey interview instruments is very helpful in your process and in analyzing the data at the end. And then lastly, and something that Lynn will talk a lot more about, is obviously, yes, we believe in very local, community, driven and initiated data, but there's so much existing data and indicators out there that can tell you a lot, that don't forget they're out there, integrate them into the rest of your process. And I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to pass it on to Lynn to talk about, okay, so you're ready and you want to do this thing, and let's walk through what that may look like to get it done. And I'm going to go, sorry everyone, hope I'm not making you seasick. There we go.
Great, thank you very much, Wendy. Okay, so now we're really going to get to it. So after you've gone through all these initial steps of getting started on your food assessment, you will have identified some of the questions, or maybe one or two key questions you're really trying to answer. Now is the time you're going to start looking at your data collection tools and the modules that are going to help you determine what indicators are out there that can help answer the questions that you're interested in answering. So we're going to go now to the second area, which is called data collection. On the data collection, you will see there are 4 components of the food system that are highlighted at the top, and these are production, processing, distribution, access, and security. Each of the components consists of what I'm going to call 3 key elements, and that is, in each component, you will find that there is what I call a report module that provides detailed guidance on what types of questions and information is needed to understand that particular component of the food system. This module will include guidance on the indicators that you can use to answer a specific question. It has hyperlinks throughout, so hyperlinks to existing databases, to primary data collection tools, and to other reports and examples of food assessments that were done on that component. And downloading this report in any given one of the components, downloading that report will give you a lot, and I can't emphasize this enough, a lot of helpful guidance and save you a lot of time if you stay focused on the information that you just need instead of getting mired down in all of the data that is out there. And believe me, there is a lot of data out there. And that's why having clear questions and clear guidance is so important. The second thing you will find in each one of the components is you will see this web page has direct links to some of the key secondary data sets. And so here I'm scrolling down under the production component, and you can see there's a number of secondary data sets that have direct hyperlinks to it. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And then each of the components also has an example or 2 or 3 of primary data collection tools. To give you a sense of how these components work, I'm going to walk you through an example. So let's get started with assessing what's grown in Colorado. And we're going to make this really simple because we don't have a lot of time. But what we would do if we wanted to do that, we'd say, hey, let's go to the production. And so the production component would pop up by clicking on that top level. And here you will see there's a short description of what production covers, including information about the types grown, the demographics of local farmers and farms, and so on. You will also see, as I showed before, that there are those secondary data set links and those primary data collection tools. So let's get started on food production. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to look at that initial paragraph, and you're going to find in that first component, you're going to find the module for that component. In this case, it's the production module. I'm going to click on it. And it came up, so that's a really good sign. So this is literally just a PDF. It's a report, and it's a report that provides all of the background on production. As you scroll through it, and I'm just going to get us to page 7 in a moment, but basically you will see every single one of these production, or every single one of these modules has a little bit of background about the food assessment framework. And then it goes into really talking about what that component is about. And in this case, it's what is food and agricultural production. It will give you a little bit of graphics. It will give you some history. It will give you, usually there will be a nice map that will give you a better understanding of what's happening in the U.S. on it. And then it will finally get to a section that is all about the indicators. And in this case, we're talking about, because it's production, the food production indicators. The indicators in food production really fall under what I call 6 major questions. And these are the questions that you might be interested in asking, and you would be able to go into this report and identify what indicators will be able to answer those questions. So these big questions include, what do we grow in our region? What do our local farms and farmers look like? Is farming profitable for producers? Does our community value local agriculture? What is the economic impact of local agriculture? And finally, is local agriculture sustainable? Every one of these has its own subsection, and it will talk to you and give you some background information, and then it will go in and give you hyperlinks to the data that you could find to be able to answer that. But I want to go back for a moment to show you how you can get to data in a number of different ways. One of the things that I think is exciting about this website is that, you know, people come to information and use information in different ways, and we've really tried to think about how you can get to the information you need to regardless of kind of your learning style and your surfing style. And so you can get to these databases either through that production module report, or in this case you could go to the website. And what I'm going to do now is take you to a secondary data set. Before I take you to a secondary data set, I want to say a little bit about secondary data. The thing you need to understand about secondary data is that it has been collected by other organizations and other agencies, and it will not necessarily be exactly what you're looking for. It will be really useful data, but it is likely not to be exactly what you're looking for. Most often, it will not be at the geographic scale that matches maybe your question or your community food assessment boundaries, but it will be close enough that it will give you enough information that will be useful, just not a perfect match. It will also be dated. You should know that. So, for example, one of the most important pieces of external secondary data for production comes through the U.S. Census of Agriculture. Well, this census is done every 5 years, and there is a delay between when the final data collection of that year is done and when it's posted. So, for example, just last year in 2012 was the new 5-year update of the U.S. Agricultural Census, but what's available online right now is the 2007 data. And likely that 2012 data will not be available until next year. So your data for secondary data will always be a little bit older than you wished it were. And then the last thing I'll say about secondary data is that secondary data sometimes will be incomplete. And again, a really good example here is with the U.S. Census of Agriculture, where the database has to protect proprietary information and has to protect economic information of the farmers. And so if you're in a county with only 1 or 2 farms, for example, that are growing sugar snap peas, then you will know the number of farms that are growing sugar snap peas, but you will not know the number of acres that are devoted to that. And that really is because what the census is doing is taking away a piece of data so that somebody would not be able to actually identify a given farm. And this is just the way they protect farmers who are sharing their economic information with the government. Okay, so I'm going to take you straight into the U.S. Census data. When you click on this link, you will see it takes you into the 2007 Colorado County level data tables, of which there are many. In fact, there are, sorry if you're getting dizzy, 56 of them. This is a wealth of information, but it can be a little overwhelming. So what are we looking at here? Well, you can see that you've got data that ranges from the market value of agricultural products sold, which is in Table 2, to irrigated land, which is shown in Table 10, to all different types of animals, cattle, hogs, pigs, poultry, sheep, lambs, and so on, which are Tables 11 through 20, to bees and honey in Table 21, to vegetables and fruit, which are covered in Tables 29 to 34, to organic operations at Table 43, and owner's characteristics, which are the last set of tables 46 through 56. So I'm going to choose Table 30, vegetables, potatoes, melons, and harvest for sale, just to take a look at it. And what I would like to do is to make this just a little bit more readable. So I want to increase its size. So here we go. All right. Now hopefully you can all see this. This is simply looking at the acres that are harvested for vegetables, potatoes, and melons. And it shows you both the 2007 data, and then these tables are nice because they always have the previous data, and in this case it was 2002. So off the top, we can see in all of Colorado there were 708 farms that were harvesting these particular products, and it encompassed a total of over 97,000 acres was devoted to it. In 2002, there were 451 farms and about 39,500 acres or so devoted to it. So the first thing we would say is, wow, it looks like there's been some significant growth in vegetables, potatoes, melons that have been harvested in Colorado. We've almost doubled, well, nearly doubled the number of farms, and we certainly have doubled the number of acres. And so that looks pretty promising. That looks kind of exciting. You will also see on here that they show you the difference on the number of acres and farms that are growing these vegetables and harvesting them for processing or for the fresh market. Again, that's actually kind of a nice piece of information that you might want to know for a local food system. I want to show you now just a real quick example of counties. What's going on here, and this table has a tremendous amount of information in it. The next thing you see is all this same information is broken down by county. So we're just going to look at Adams County simply because it's the first one up and it's the easiest to look at. You'll see there's 28 farms, and there was 1,161 acres of harvested vegetables, etc. And here you can see is that missing data. That D is deleted data that would give away too much information, so they don't let you know what that is. And that's the way it is, and you should just know that about the data. You can also see that in 2002 there were 15 farms, but whoa, take a look at this. There were 4,481 acres. So there were like twice as many farms in 2007, but only a quarter of the number of acres from 2002. This is actually a great example of how data alone can only confuse you. You really need to have some understanding of the context of your area. You probably are going to have to ask questions of your coalition. If you found data like this and you went, what in the world is going on? You would really want to take this to your coalition and say, who knows what's going on here? I mean, have the vegetable farmers just left this county? What's going on? And so while I don't really know what's going on, my hypothesis on Adams County is that the difference between 2002 and 2007 was that the city of Denver annexed in and bought some of Adams County so that they could put the new airport, Denver International Airport, out there. And I bet that that took up a number of the acres, and that's what happened. That's my good guess. Now, moving on. The next thing you might want to do, because this is a great table and all of that, but there's some really nice other databases out there. And here I want to show you that we've got 7 different databases you could take a look at on secondary data set. Now, at first that may seem very promising, but I have to give you a little warning that 4 of these databases, and here I'm going to highlight them, the Ag Census, the CARES National Interactive Maps, the CARES National Reporting Tool, and the USDA Food Environment Atlas are actually all using the same data that comes from the Ag Census. Now, you may be going, oh, wow, well, what's the point? Well, actually, there is a good point. They may be using the same data, but they use it in a different way. And so let me give you a good example, although that's not the example I want to do first. So I'm going to go to this one. Let's go to the National Reporting Tool. This is a wonderful site where you can pull information into reports. And so we, of course, are interested in Colorado. I'm going to select Colorado. We talked about how we thought that, or we've been looking at, the county data. I want to look at Adams since we already looked at it. Now, in your reports, you can do up to 3 reports at once, so you can do comparisons. I would like to compare Adams County to the whole state. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to have Area 1 is Adams County, Area 2 is Colorado. Now I'm going to select some data. Now over here is where all of the data is sitting, and as you click on any one of these, it will start to download, or it will start to pull open more menus. I have to tell you there are approximately 7,000 indicators on this data set. So it is more than the Ag Census. It has all sorts of data that's in here, which is what makes it a very exciting tool. It really can be a little overwhelming to find that data. So what I suggest, if you know exactly what you're looking for, you can go to the search data. And in this case, I'm going to put in agriculture and hit return. And it's going to pull up for me all of the different possible agricultural data that's there. And indeed, look, that's the one we just looked at in the Ag Census table. So I'm going to pick that. Vegetables harvest. And it's also going to tell me the number of acres, the total number of acres in that county that is under production. Now I'm going to say make report. And it's actually quite quick. And by the way, you can add as many indicators as you want to a report, but I warn you to not get too carried away because you will be overwhelmed. And you really want to create reports that make sense to you. So what do we see? The first thing we see is that, as you remember, report area number 1 was Adams County. Well, there's that 1,161 acres that we saw in the census data. And the total number of acres in Adams County that are under some kind of cultivation or ranching, so it's ranching and farming, is over 700,000. Here you can see this is all of Colorado, and it shows you the total number of acres for Colorado that's under production. For vegetables and the total of ranching and farming that is under production. If you click on this little number here, it will take you even deeper into the information, and it will show you another piece of information, which is the percent of the total farms and vegetables harvested for sale in Adams County, which is a little bit depressing. So less than 1% of the acres under production in Adams County are actually devoted to vegetables. So moving on from that depressing piece of information, the next thing you could do is you could make a map, or you could export it to a report. If you exported it, you could turn it into a PDF or a Word. If you want to make a map, this is really fun. This goes over into the other mapping program, but I first clicked on and then wanted to go somewhere else. And so you can get to it in multiple ways. So here is a map that shows you, indeed, this is, by the way, Adams County, I have to know that, and you can see on the vegetables harvested that it shows that that color is from 1 to 10,000. Now we know that we just looked at the actual report, and it's a little over 1,000, so it's not close to 10,000, and that is always kind of the limitation of maps because they do have to create these big categories. That's why having the actual numbers, not just maps, are really important for understanding your food system. I want to show you very quickly, you could get to that map without showing you how to do it, because you can do that on your own, but you can get to that very same map that we just looked at and create the same map by going in here and doing and picking your state, which again would be Colorado, and your county, and so on. Okay. Now I would like to show you a little bit on primary data collection. Primary data collection tools are actually where you're really going to get a chance to look at the details of what's happening in your particular area. Now, you would not go straight into collecting your own data until after you have done the best mining you can of existing data. You might as well use the data that's out there. Moreover, by the time you finish using the data that's out there, it will give you a much better clue as to what more you need to know, and that will help you decide what type of primary data you want to collect. What we've done in the FAF is to provide examples of primary data collection tools. In fact, we have over 100 examples of primary data collection tools. On the website themselves, we pull up a couple of them which we think are really good examples. If you want to get to additional ones, you would go back into that module report and go to the appendix, which will have hyperlinks to all the other primary data collection tools for that particular one. Let's take a look at this one, though, for production. This is a really nice tool that was created for Iowa, for northern Iowa. And what it does is it really gets into a number of things that you can't get in existing data. So it talks about, and it collects some of the things you would have, but maybe not in the categories, so jams and jellies and baked goods, because it turns out that producers sometimes actually do some of their own processing. And so that might be something you really want to find out. Are they doing some of their own processing? Also, it goes into what kinds of production methods are they using. It gets into what types of facilities and equipment do they have. Are they involved in agritourism? What type of food safety protocols do they have in place? And that actually becomes very important, because if you want to sell to a school, if you're hoping to improve your farm-to-school programming in your area, or you want to bring it into other institutions, food safety protocols and food safety plans are something that has to be in place in order for those institutional buyers to buy. It also talks about methods of sales and so on. So this is a great example of what a primary data collection instrument would look like. It doesn't mean you should go out and just copy it and use it. What it does mean is that this is a good one to give you some ideas of what would make sense for you to be collecting. And we have lots of those. Like I said, there's over 100 examples of data collection tools, and you can find some of those right here on the websites, and the other ones will be available in your various modules. The next thing I want to do is just quickly go back to the top and click on the other 3 components. The next component is processing. And really, when you think about processing, it's this step of transferring food from production to consumption through the many methods, including packaging, cutting, slicing, preserving, and other means of value adding, like making jams and so on. And the ability to process local foods can really be a significant gap in our local food system. It's something we used to be able to do, but as we move to a national and global food system, the ability for us to actually process our local foods and move them into our local markets, we've really lost that capacity and that infrastructure. So this can be an area of your food assessment that you really want to look at. You may identify that this is really your problem. Maybe you know, because your coalition is there, you know what your production capacity is, but you don't know what your processing capacity is, and that's what you want to look at. So you would focus in this area. On the other hand, you may say to yourself, well, you know what? Maybe distribution is the area that we need to be looking at. And distribution really is looking at how do the raw materials as well as those that are processed move. And some of this is literally about, do we have the trucks that can move from the farms to either who wants to buy it, whether it's schools, do they have refrigerated trucks, if refrigerated trucks are needed because of the food safety plans and who they're selling to. All of these different types of components are part of distribution. Distribution can also include things that we call food hubs, and food hubs also can fall under processing, since food hubs often are about doing some types of processing. And then the last section that you might want to look at, and I think that Wendy mentioned this. This is a very common area that people like to look at, and it makes a lot of sense because it really is about access and security to food. And it covers things like residents within a community, their ability to access and secure healthy foods on a frequent and consistent basis. They examine the ability of food resources in the community, the food security within a household, whether your food is geographically accessible and affordable, and even the government policies and programs that are in place to support food access. Again, you will find a module that you can pull up, and it can walk you through all of this information. I really encourage everybody to figure out which area they're looking at and then to really pull up these modules and read them. They have a tremendous amount of information and guidance, and it will save you time and it will help you focus. And then that takes us to really the end of the data collection. So I guess in my closing remarks, what I would say is that food systems are big. They're very big, and no one can assess every component of a food system, and you should not try. As cool and exciting as it may seem, you will burn out. You really want to focus on what are the questions that will lead to what we can do about the food system. So you want to be very clear about that. And one way to get a handle on how to start beyond the great getting started resources that we've got on this website is to also look at what other communities have done and get some inspiration. And so to that end, I'm going to have Wendy walk you through the case study section of the Food System Toolbox.
Thanks, Lynn. This is Wendy. I'm back. I'm going to disrupt us for 1 second. And he escaped. And I'm just going to pull up we have lost view. We have minor technical glitch here, people. Oh, we have lost view of our Q&A box. So hold on, bear with me, people. I just want to make sure no one out there is screaming and telling me that you can't hear us. Okay, we're good. All right, sorry, everyone. I'm going to go back now to the website. Okay, thanks, Lynn. So yes, as Lynn mentioned, part of one of the goals of having this entire section built up off of the Food Systems Toolbox is we want to also be a place, we just want to make it a place that makes anyone who wants to do a food assessment or redo their food assessment, strengthen existing food assessments, do one down the line. We want to make it easier in every way and really to streamline resources and increase some accessibility to food assessments. And one way we think we can do that is by sharing information on here of what other people are doing in Colorado and to kind of showcase some of those stories. How have other people tackled this? What questions have they asked? How did they get it done? So as Lynn said, we just want to flag this section for you, the case study section. I think that this is probably an area of the toolbox that will grow the most in the coming months and the year. Right now we have a few very short case studies up here based around these key central questions that kind of show how other communities have tackled food assessments and the questions they have asked, how they've gone about pulling information. I think given how many more communities all the time are doing food assessments in Colorado, that we will be able to beef this section up a lot. I think we will not only be able to add more stories about who's doing what, but actually really add some more content as well and be able to say, like, here's the question they asked, this is the process they went through, these are the tools that they used, this is what was valuable, this maybe it wasn't what's valuable. So we really want to focus attention on this section as we move forward. So I just wanted to flag it. As right now we have 3 beautiful, short and sweet stories of how Montezuma, Longmont, and Chaffee are 3 communities we've highlighted here, how they went about thinking about and starting their food assessments. And please come back and visit this section frequently. Also, if you are a community that has completed a food assessment or you're in the middle of doing one and you have a story that you would like to share, you have tools and resources that you have used that we want to get up here, please. We will share contact information at the end. Please, please show us. Contact us and share your story and share your tools and resources. The last thing I want to flag here quickly, scrolling down, the last section is resources. You saw a lot of these resources already under data collection as Lynn walked through them. We also thought it would be helpful to just have one master page where we put everything together. So this page is organized in terms of nationwide secondary data sets. Lynn walked you through a lot of those. Colorado, so Colorado-specific data, secondary data sets. National primary data collection tools. So, an assessment from San Diego or an assessment from Albuquerque. Did they have a survey tool or an interview tool or something they collected information with? We thought, if we know it, we'd like to share it with you. What I think is most useful and exciting in this section are the Colorado primary data collection tools and food assessment reports. So I'm going to scroll to the way bottom because, as Lynn said, there's just a lot of data available out there to you. But if you scroll to the bottom here and look at Colorado primary data collection tools and food assessment reports, in these sections here, this is where we're trying to put, if we have found a food assessment, we want to put it up here. So please contact us if we're missing some of your information. But if there's a completed food assessment report, if there are tools, as I said, interview instruments, survey instruments, any kind of outreach, we would like to share them here. Nobody wants to start from scratch. It's always easiest to learn from other people's models. So this is what we have. So these are all linked to the tools. There's a bit of, under food assessment reports, there's also a bit of, these are kind of mixed together a little bit. We didn't want to duplicate things too much. But under food assessment reports also have some links to primary data collection tools. So look under both these last sections to see, gosh, how have other people and communities in Colorado done this already and what is replicable? The other thing I should have said first off that I want to say, right now, the point of this again is to really kind of streamline this process for people. As a consultant, I have worked with several communities across the state doing food assessments, but I feel that this is very valuable because I love my job and I love working with communities, but I also see that there could possibly be some wasted resources at times there, and that if community after community starts this process from scratch over and over again and pays a consultant like me, money to do it, that there could be some easier ways to approach food assessment. There are some common knowledge, some common tools that everyone can start with to really, hopefully, increase efficiency, save some time, save some money, and expand our knowledge within our state of what our food systems look like and who is eating what, where's the food going that we're growing, and more questions. So that's my last point there, my last pitch for the toolbox here. And I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. I think I know how to do that. So it's right there. I didn't know how. There, I did it. And I'm going to pass it back to Lisa and then open up for questions.
Great. So I think we don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to talk for a minute or two and encourage you to submit any questions that you might have. That was amazing, Lynn and Wendy. So much content that you are sharing. So I can understand if people are needing to process. And so I do want to highlight that we will have, sorry, we're trying to get ourselves set, that we will have resources for you. So we've got on the contact page, and we will send this out in a follow-up email, the direct link to the food systems toolbox that you can remember at the bottom is where you'll find the community food assessment. Here's Wendy's contact information. She'd be your first point of contact. Once you're digging into some of this amazing data and figuring out how to use some of the secondary data sources, Lynn is really, I believe, has the expertise in that. And then if you really don't know what to do, you can contact me. And I'll just send you back to Wendy or Lynn as appropriate. Also want to highlight that we are continuing a webinar series this year. We'll be doing monthly webinars, and we've identified topics for the next 4 months that you can see listed on your screen, and we'll be sending these around and getting invitations out as they approach. But also want to ask that if you've got other topics that you'd like to have covered, to please let us know that. This isn't about us, it's about you, and making sure that you have the information and tools and questions answered in order to really increase healthy food access in the state of Colorado. And I did notice on our registration we had a handful of folks from Kansas. So welcome to, I think this applies in Kansas and in many other states as well. So we encourage that as well. But knowing that our mission is focused a little bit on Colorado.
Hawaii.
We had Hawaii?
Yeah, Hawaii.
Oh, that's awesome. So welcome, all of you out-of-staters. We are happy to have you as well. So we have received our first question. Again, please go ahead and enter your questions into the question box. And this question, I don't know if Lynn or Wendy can answer it. Asked, have you incorporated data from the Piton Foundation? So I believe that would be more local and Colorado data.
Right. And so what you should know is that the secondary databases that we showed you are databases that are out there that we have no control over. And so to the degree that those secondary databases have incorporated data from the Piton Foundation, then I could say yes. Do I know that? Actually, I don't off the top of my head. If there was any, it would be in the Colorado databases, not in those national secondary databases.
And this is Wendy, just to stress too, and we can certainly add more resources, absolutely, but we did try to keep it to Colorado only secondary data sets. There are a lot of community foundations, other organizations that do wonderful work at a very local or municipal or county level, and at this point we wanted to keep it to data sets that are available for the entire state.
So this next question, I think probably Wendy, in your experience, could you give an example of how a food system assessment has successfully led to policy change and an example where the recommendations were challenged by the city or local governments and why?
Yes. So let me start with the second part of that question. So there, and if whoever this person is, I'm happy to talk about this example more. One assessment that I actually worked on, thank you, sorry, we're opening that. Oh, hi, Ashley. I could have talked to you more about this question. So one of the assessments that I've actually worked on was the city of Longmont, and it's actually sort of, I think it's a beautiful example, but also an example of challenges that all sort of policy advocacy efforts come up against. And that is that we did a year-and-a-half long, very community-based food assessment, and we worked very closely with the city planning department from the very beginning. Much of the findings and results from that food assessment were then integrated, findings, recommendations integrated into an entire new chapter written around health and wellness for the city's comprehensive plan. It was a lovely example in my mind of when you have the right partners at the table from the very beginning that can really implement findings and results from a food assessment to lead to sort of institutional and policy change. However, that would be one of the challenging examples as well, the comp plan has not been adopted. Many comp plans were actually rejected by the City Council recently, and so now we're kind of going back to say, okay, there's some more subtle, minor sort of step-by-step ways to sort of institutionalize some of those results and findings. So yes, there are many, many examples of successful policy change implemented. I wish I actually had someone on from La Plata County right now. La Plata County was actually, we have their tools up on here. They were the first community that I know of in the state of Colorado to do a very, very comprehensive food assessment. They were funded by Community Food Projects, like a USDA Community Food Projects grant. And that assessment that, I'm going to get this wrong, but it was at least 4 to 5 years ago that they began, was instrumental in informing and in sort of supporting and encouraging many, many efforts in La Plata County, including the farm to school work, work with local retailers, primarily restaurants. They have some really great campaigns around Eat Locally, Eat Healthy now. They now have a food policy council that's up and running, and I could go on, but I encourage you to look at that example online, and we can talk more. And there's more questions, so I apologize for taking so long.
So I'll read the next one. Are there any good examples you know of how a food systems assessment was designed to provide market research for potential food business entrepreneurs?
So the focus of the community food assessments that we have included in our resources, the Colorado example, a lot of how the tools and resources, what it's focused on through this section, I would say no is the short answer. I feel like there are some very good firms out there. This is the work that I know that Puma is now doing a lot of work around in the state of Colorado. If there are folks online, I'm sure that are familiar with the work of the Food Trust. They're very well known for basically sort of kickstarting all of this healthy food financing work in the country. The Food Trust has actually been around in Pennsylvania for a very long time, and they have years of doing market-based research around food business for food business entrepreneurs, not just of grocers and retailers, the food business entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes. So again, I could talk more about that. But in terms of the community food assessments that we're focusing on here, not so much.
Okay, thank you. So the Food Trust would be a resource to look at, and can you remind me what PUMA's an acronym for? Okay, we'll find it and we'll include it in our response. But they're doing a number of their national consulting firm, but they're doing a number of projects here in Colorado that are associated with healthy food and healthy communities. So the next question is we want to find out how much of what is being grown locally is being sold and theoretically then consumed within our county. Can you point us towards someone who has successfully created an instrument to assess this?
Carol Parker, I'm going to take that question offline because no, it's very complicated. I'm sorry to give you such a bad answer. Can I tackle that one offline?
Well, yes, can you give a short answer why it's complicated?
Yes, and you can chime in as well. So I have not come across a single instrument that can track that kind of distribution. It is often actually very hard for even a producer to identify every single one of their markets, and we just don't have very good tracking in place is what I'm saying. So it's something that I think everyone is aware of that's working in any sort of food systems issue, whether it's farm to school, whether it's the Colorado Department of Agriculture, is that there's a sort of issue of tracking, is that even if you're an individual producer, it's challenging for you to even identify all of your distribution, all of your markets, and where all of your products are going. It's going to be very hard for anyone to do that for you, or to do that sort of on a larger scale, to look at that at a community level. So we have a variety of challenges over tracking. There's been some good work done. I think you should probably look at what they did in La Plata County. They are doing some really strong producer surveys in Montezuma County right now. The results aren't out yet, but asking producers there to really identify their, markets by product. So we'll probably see some more coming online, but I'm not.
So, and I would just add to that, Carol, that it seems to me, I mean, this is what happens when you're at the front end of a movement, as opposed to kind of well embedded into it, and that is that there are different ways. If we got more of our producers and we got more of our markets to really be using the Colorado Proud label, we would be able to have a much better sense of what is being grown and what is being sold here. But we're still working on that. Although the good news is it is a program that more and more producers are really using. Another good example is we're in conversations now with really collecting data from schools on their farm to school and what producers. So it would be a little slice where we would know, how much of the institutional school food is being procured and consumed in Colorado. But of course, that's just a piece of all of the markets and ways that one could consume food. So it is really complicated, and it's a really good question, and we wish we had a really good answer.
Yes.
Well, thank you both, because I think that's helpful for people to understand the challenges that are out there and that we are in early stages.
And it's, well, yeah. There's I'd say that sort of aside to that as well, is that it's a great challenge, and we all are for traceability and tractability, or whatever you call it. We're all for it. We all want more information. And I think we all also need to be sensitive to the burdens that sometimes this kind of work can place on individual producers that don't have the kind of business development support or any other support to actually get that kind of information. So the call out for sort of larger policy work is when there's incredible work being done by CSU Extension, obviously, that they're totally maxed out. And so I think that kind of work really calls for external partners that can come to the table with the time and the tools and the resources to help producers gather that kind of information that an individual producer does not have the luxury of time on their own to track.
Great, thank you. I think that is an important part as you embark on these assessments of thinking about the imposition on those that you're trying to survey and really being sensitive to that. So we don't have any more questions, and we're at the end of time, but I do want to thank Stacy and Max for informing us on the acronym PUMA, which is the Progressive Urban Management Associates, and you can look them up online and see what resources they may have. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hand it to our facilitator to wrap us up.
Thank you all for joining us. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be available on the LiveWell Colorado Toolbox. If you go to www.livewellcolorado.org, search for Toolbox and select webinars. That will be available tomorrow, as well as in our follow-up email that we'll be sending to everyone that registered for this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. God,